Hi, I am Dawn Marisa Lace with Innis 2022, and I'm thrilled to be here with three amazing people, Laura Kerbey, Eliza Fricker, and Harry Thompson. I found them on Twitter, and they were talking about a lot of different neurodivergent topics, but the one we're going to talk about today is pathological demand avoidance, or PDA, as it's referred to. In the United States, PDA is more commonly public displays of affection. So it's really funny when I try to talk to people about PDA, because that's what comes into their heads. But this is pathological demand avoidance. And as someone who has a sprinkle of that in her own life, and children who are more elements of the sundae than the sprinkles in that category, this is a really important topic. But it's one that I find, at least here in the United States, almost not known. And so I'm thrilled that these folks have come to talk with us today, and I'm gonna turn it over to you all. Anybody who wants to go first, introduce yourself, say stuff.
Harry, shall I go first? I know you love an introduction.
Laura, who am I?
You are Harry Thompson.
All right.
You're a PDA extraordinaire.
Am I?
You're a public speaker.
I do that.
Author.
Yes.
And jolly good egg.
Oh, God. Who told you?
I worked it out myself.
Yeah.
And
okay. Do I do you now?
You can do me.
That's Laura with the fantastic fringe that I did notice. I noticed that one. Laura is the co-founder of NEST, Neurodivergent Education Support and Training, that was once past Positive Autism Support and Training. Laura is recently diagnosed ADHD herself. She trains schools, organizations, etc. on PDA, autism, ADHD, etc. And in the process of becoming an author. Yes,
with Eliza Fricker.
Shall I do mine? I'm Eliza Fricker. I'm an illustrator, author. My book is The Family Experience of PDA. And I also write a blog called Missing the Mark, which is about autism and the education system using comic strips.
That's us.
And you're autistic yourself.
I am autistic myself, recently diagnosed. Yeah.
I love it. I've read Eliza's book. I'm one of those people who, possibly to my own financial detriment, will go buy things because I love people and I want to support them. But I found your comic strips on Twitter, like I said, Eliza, and just fell in love with them. They're so... sometimes I just feel like your comic strips are a hug of representation and visibility and all those kinds of things, because it explains these little bits of pathological demand avoidance in ways that are so loving and compassionate and open. And as a parent who raised my kids not knowing any of us as neurodivergent individuals and the things that I struggled with, I so wish I had understood if just this topic, especially with my oldest, if I could have known their identity as valid and appropriate and right, and not listened to all the voices of make them, they should, why aren't they, all that kind of stuff. If I could have understood this, it would have changed so much for the better. And so I'm hoping the three of you will give us pathological demand avoidance basic. Like, what is the entry level explanation and thoughts around this idea, and maybe some ideas about how to live better if you are demand avoidant, or how to help somebody who might be.
Who wants to do the outline of what it is?
Well, I was just thinking, Harry and I did a webinar last week, which was entitled PDA, It's More Than Just Demand Avoidance. And PDA is usually referred to as a type of autism which is characterized by high anxiety and a need to be in control and then avoid demands. So that's kind of, I guess that's kind of a PDA in a nutshell, but there is so much more to PDA than that, because demand avoidance is something that we all experience. You know, I have demand avoidance as a ADHD adult. I avoid demands which are boring, or, you know, like the classic one for me is report writing. It's boring, so I will put report writing off. But pathological demand avoidance is something very, very different. And with pathological demand avoidance, yes, there is an anxiety-driven need to avoid demands and remain in control, but that also therefore means that somebody who has PDA will avoid the things that they do want to do as well as the things that they don't want to do. So they experience this internal self-imposed demand avoidance as well.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
Go ahead, Harry.
Something that I like to do as well is draw attention to other parts of the PDA profile, not just demand avoidance, because I think that's where a lot of confusion arises. A lot of people may assume that they're PDA when they experience demand avoidance, but it's not as simple as that. Demand avoidance of the PDA kind is characterized by its quality as well as its frequency, as Laura alluded to. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily have any bearing on whether the individual likes the thing or has done the thing before or is good at the thing. It doesn't discriminate in that way, right? It doesn't discriminate. So perhaps with other forms of demand avoidance, there are very clear reasons, logical reasons for why something isn't done or carried out. And we can see this right across the full range of autistic experience. Some people may refuse to enter a building that's too bright. Maybe someone doesn't even have to be autistic to find themselves unable to work when perhaps they're sleep deprived. Perhaps some people experience a significant amount of social anxiety, and thus going to a party or a gathering causes a lot of stress. But with PDA, the reason isn't clear. It's the fact that it's a demand. It's the fact that this poses a threat to my autonomy is enough of a reason to not do it. I have to be in control. I have to be autonomous. And if this task, if this request, if this command or instruction will swerve me off course, then it will be avoided. But not only that, but the manner in which it's avoided is key as well. So a lot of the children we work with will come up with these elaborate, creative excuses. So a lot of kids say, my legs don't work, or I can't do that, I'm a castle, or, you know, I'm sellotape, you know, or, you know, I don't exist, and, or, you know, they'll throw themselves out of a window or something like that. They will resort to almost a kind of performance artistry as a way of getting out of doing things. So the social strategies as a part of avoidance are key. The individual is also likely to be impulsive. They may or may not have a rich fantasy world into which they retreat for all sorts of reasons, engaging in role play, almost as a kind of stim for the mind. I see it, right? When I was growing up, I would jump in and out of different characters, perfecting their accents and honing their mannerisms. Sometimes that would be for survival purposes, or maybe I can perfect one of these characters and utilize it in unsafe environments. Or maybe sometimes I'm just doing that because it's fun. And also a tendency to have interests in people. So yes, whilst demand avoidance is a salient criterion, it's not the be all and end all. PDA is a profile, not just one behavior.
Thank you both for explaining that. Eliza, you came to your work, if I understand correctly, through beginning to understand your own child. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think for us it was having a diagnosis. So and our child was diagnosed when they were about 7, and seeing that was a very it was a very generic approach to that diagnosis. So the strategies that were put in place as support didn't work, and they were very much about, I mean, it was 2 strands really, because the strategies are very much in terms of support are very much putting the onus still on the child to alter the child to be able to fit into an environment, which is something that I think many of us realise as parents quite early on. We have that gut reaction that this isn't okay and this isn't right, probably as well because we, as we find out later, we are also neurodivergent ourselves, so you've got that going on. But there's this sort of sense it's not okay what is happening with your child, but because you're working with systems, it's very difficult to try and really argue that when you are being sent on courses to do these things, to alter your child, to change your parenting. But I very much had this sense it wasn't okay, and it didn't work anyway. And eventually it was finding out more about the demand avoidant profile and understanding about anxiety and the levels of anxiety within that. That's when, you know, I could change those approaches and feel, and I think that's what it is for a lot of parents. It's not necessarily getting another diagnosis, but having that understanding, and then you can use the more person-led, child-led approaches and the holistic approaches that will be much more beneficial to all of you as a family, and a more connected way of being as a family. So that is really, really important. And that for us was that kind of, people talk about that light bulb moment when you find out about people, you know, but that was for us that real shone a light on kind of quite a few years of it being quite a dark place to be in when you're butting up against these systems. So yeah.
Eliza, could you please give a couple of examples of things that a parent out there might relate to, that children and adults, but children who maybe demand avoidant would exhibit? What kinds of things might they do, so that if folks who are listening to this can sort of get a personal relationship to what we're talking about?
So I think probably what you'll be advised would be a lot of structure, to put in a lot of structure into your home, put in visual timetables, to keep things quite rigid and routine. And those are the things that you'll probably see your child rebuke or rebuff quite early on. And you will also see that your child is very, very, I mean, to use the phrase of my next book, it's can't not won't, because your child is very able and very wanting to do a lot of things, but they're not able to. So often you'll have a child who you'll say, well, do you want to go to the park, or do you fancy going to the park? And they'll be so overwhelmed, they'll say, I don't know, because they want to do something, but they will not be able to do it. And so a lot of those things, even cajoling your child into doing stuff, is not going to work. So probably early on you will see that there's just a rejection of a lot of those supports that you're encouraged to use. The egg timer, I think, is one of the things I often talk about. The egg timer to time, which again, these things that once you break them down, they're things that no one would want. Who wants an egg timer to get dressed? But you'll probably see that egg timer will get chucked across the room pretty quickly, pretty early on, and that won't be used again. So yeah.
Harry, do you have maybe a personal story that you would be willing to share that would be an example for folks listening of what it is to experience demand avoidance?
Yeah, a few. Let me think. Well, one that always springs to mind that I know I've spoken publicly about before is when I was away for the week. I was on a kind of retreat years ago, and I bring my guitar with me everywhere I go, everywhere I can go, right? Because music's very important for me therapeutically. And someone figured out that I'd brought it with me. And I can remember we were sitting around a campfire, and they all said, someone said, "Oh, you must bring your guitar." "Yes, you must bring your guitar." "Yes, wonderful, you must bring your guitar." Cool. And inside I said no, but outside I said, "Yes, I'll go and get it." And then I went back to my room I was staying in, and now I may have played guitar for probably almost 2 decades now. I don't know how to restring a guitar. I've never learned. So I ripped the strings out of the guitar there and then. And I remember as I was doing it, I was thinking, why am I doing this? You know, so there's a self-sabotage element to it, because then I couldn't play guitar for the rest of the week, you know, but I felt that I had to do it in that very moment. And, you know, other random examples, I can remember having to do an art project at school and pretending I was like dying of a zinc deficiency.
Oh,
you know, I don't know why that came into my head, zinc deficiency, you know, and just constantly fabricating, you know, illnesses and injuries in order to get out of things, or to just try and get sent home all the time. My common phrase was, "I'm allergic to." I had an allergy to everything. I had an allergy to sweeping, you know. I had an allergy to sweeping, and an allergy to like china dishes, everything. So yeah, it's fair, you know, as to how it feels very paradoxical, because there can be elements of, I kind of do want to do this, but you can feel it set in. Little things can set it in, little comments from people, little facial expressions. You know, I remember not doing something because someone was dancing. You know, I didn't like their dancing. So nope, never again. Absolutely, you've ruined it completely. You know, just tiny little things give rise to this pinprick of anxiety that very quickly suffuses and pervades the entire body. And before you know it, you've been possessed by that which is in control. You know, the almost like some kind of daddy, you know, like I've stepped forth and this is now what's happening. Before it recedes again, you're like, oh God, why? Lots of little things, you know, even if they're rooted in positivity and praise. I can remember one year I was in my teens, I needed a new wallet, and I was really excited. It was my birthday and I had this new wallet. And then my brother suddenly revealed that my mum didn't like my old wallet. And so I destroyed the new one and kept the old one. And then 2 days later, like, oh God, I needed that. You know, just things like that. Just things like, no, don't. I can't have you telling me what to do. I can't have you expressing what you would like. You know, it was very much like that. People having preferences were just as demanding, right? Because it would indicate that they had an idea of perhaps who I should be. Being praised for homework, being praised for these things, being praised for items of clothing, you know, being praised for new haircuts would often result in this knee-jerk response of, you know, changing my haircut or cutting it off, cutting my own hair. ripping off the clothing that people are complimenting, you know. So it's just this bizarre state of mind of nothing is coming in. I'm my own person. Do not taint me with anything, any gesture, any comment, any instruction, any hint. I am me. I have to be me unadulteratedly.
That makes so much sense for me and my experience with especially my oldest. I am a complimenting person. I love catching people doing good things. I love, and it was near devastating to me that anytime I would compliment, praise, try to lift up my oldest, interest would be lost. Things would get wrecked. Yeah, just like, because I didn't understand our identity as neurodivergent people, and I had no idea about pathological demand avoidance. I took it very personally. I thought that my oldest just really did not like me, and that this was a direct response to me personally. And as I've learned about demand avoidance, I've learned that just isn't it at all. It's not a personal resistance. It's something much deeper than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting you talking about perhaps getting excited or encouraging something. You know, that's a tricky one. I have sought to sabotage friendships and relationships because of comments that maybe family members might make, like, you seem happy at the moment, or aren't you so happy you're at this new school with all these new friends? Can just ruin it. It just literally just ruins everything, those comments, because, and it links in with the praise thing. There is a sense that your positivity is demanding, because your positivity towards what I'm doing indicates that you're going to want to see it again, because you feel good about it. And when you feel good about it, you want to have that experience of feeling good again. So now your good feeling is dependent on what I do. So back off.
Yeah, and I think as a parent, and again, not understanding my own brain wiring, I tried all of the wrong things to help this, to help my oldest enjoy their accomplishments. Like, I wanted them to enjoy their talents, their skills, their intelligence, their life, and any input I gave along those lines went in the other direction. And now I understand the way my autistic self will kind of take over and double down, right? Oh, that didn't work. I think I'll try harder, right? The sweet little autistic brain inside of me that somehow thinks, you didn't understand, therefore I will try again the exact same thing in the hopes that you will understand. That went just so spectacularly wrong with what I now understand to be the PDA in my oldest and my youngest, not to the same degrees, but they're all adults now, and we're still in that space where I'm trying to learn how to best communicate with these wonderful people, because my natural self doesn't do good things for them. My natural self is all like praise and happy and like, ooh, that's so good. And I'm overly excitable about lots of things. And it just, it's not what they need from me.
That's what I often say when I talk to other parents. Parents are the most demand-laden people to be around their own PDA child, because they carry so much expectation. That child can feel it when they walk in that room. Their expectation, their concern, all of that is enormous for that child. And that, of course, the child doesn't want them to be upset or disappointed by them, but that can be really, really challenging. So the work has to come from us. We have to do a huge amount of work. yeah, rip up that rule book and just do it a completely different way. And often that will be appearing completely nonchalant, even at very exciting, happy times that your child does want to share with you. You have to react in a way that's pretty nonplussed. And that's challenging for us at times to be able to do that. But I think we put enormous amount of demand, emotional demand as well, on them. So.
Laura, okay, you already had something to say. Go for it.
No, I was just going to say, I think the thing with PDA parenting is that there's two things I was going to say. Is that one, that I think what's really, really important as well is Harry's mentioned autonomy and Eliza's mentioned connection. And those things are so important when you're parenting a child with PDA. And I've always described the children that I work with as being like adults that are trapped in children's bodies. And PDAs they're kind of ageless. So if you're a parent and you're saying to a child, or because I said so, why do I have to do that? Because I said so. Because I'm your dad, or because mum, or because you're too young, or because it's dangerous. All of that just means it doesn't make any sense to a PDA because they just don't see those things. But I think the other thing as well is that as a parent, parenting your child with PDA probably goes against the growth parenting would be. And I remember once this family I he was a very old-fashioned, and he had an old-fashioned parenting style. And he came to see me one morning for a consult.
We're having some technical difficulties, Laura. We may need to wait for your connection to catch up.
Okay.
All right. Can you try telling that parent story again, please?
Yeah, sure. So this dad came for a consult with me one morning, and he said, Laura, I've done something this morning that, is just completely against what I ever thought I'd do as a parent. And I said, well, what have you done? And he said, I let my child go on his iPad at the breakfast table this morning. I was like, okay, and what happened? And he said, well, I'm here on time. He got out the house on time for school. It was like the best morning we've probably ever had. But he said that even that, like in his head, he had this rule: no screens at the breakfast table. Breakfast should be the family sitting down, having a meal, talking about the day. And I said, you're putting all those demands on him before he's even got out the door for school, which was also really, really challenging for him. So I think parenting a child with PDA means letting go of so much of what you thought being a parent was going to be. But when I talk to parents who've adopted a low demand approach and they've really kind of connected with their child, and I don't mean that in a way that they weren't connected before, but it's a different type of connection. It's treating your child like an equal rather than you being in a position of authority to them. I've had parents email me and say, it's been life transforming. It's not only transformed my child, but it's transformed our entire family. So it's just a very different way of parenting.
And I think people think that if they change that way of parenting, you're going to end up with this it's just going to be absolute carnage. You're going to have this child running riot. Actually, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
You do no demand.
You'll have riots, carnage, and all the rest of it when you do impose
when you do impose, exactly.
It's just reverse it.
Reverse it, and you don't have that. You don't. You have a child who has lots of autonomy, and you're working together to figure things out. Our child is actually more sensible than we are. Can you believe that, Laura?
Yeah.
I always say to people, it's not about strategies or methods.
No.
It's about changing your attitude, outlook, and perspective. And then the strategies makes sense. What you need to do makes sense when you understand what it is you're up against. You know, it's as simple as that. So it's because that is what a PDA is focused on, not the strategy. It doesn't matter how PDA friendly the approach is. It matters about the source of that strategy. Sometimes people ask me if at any point during my schooling, I had a teacher whom I liked. And I said, yeah. And then people quickly say, so what did they do? I said, it's not about that. That's the least of your concerns. It's not about what she did or he did, whoever it was. It was about who they were. It's about how they engaged with me. It's about what they were seeing. It's about what they were prioritizing. That, to me, gave way to strong cooperative rapport with people, right? So when I see people busying around trying to find methods and strategies, I say, no, that's not what you should be doing, because there is something inherently demanding about trying to find help for your kids. I need to find help. I need to know what to do. Tell me what to, no. There's so much wrong in there, right? The devil is in the details, you know, even there's an irony when people might come for consultations. I say the fact that you're here is a demand, you know, not just for me, right, asking me for help, but it's leaking from you. And they say, what do I do? Nothing. It's like, well, maybe you need to pick your battles and take a step back and see that they're at home, they're being fed, watered, you know, they're okay, they're safe. Maybe you need to provide more of a space in which they can really sense freedom from your emotions as well as from your expectations. And maybe the first step is no step at all. Maybe you do need to step back. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's, you know, maybe even if it's not okay, maybe just thinking, okay, well, my stress, my anxiety, my concern isn't going to help anything, even though that's incredibly difficult for a parent to just give up, right? But there's a subtle middle ground when it comes to PDA. Parents may say, I've tried this, so what are you suggesting? I do nothing? It's like, no, that's a very black and white way of looking at it. It's not traditional or there could be a middle ground.
Oh, we're having a glitch.
Oh, my
Harry,
glitch.
we lost you there for a little bit. Can you back up?
So I was talking about the importance of a middle ground where the child is waiting for you, right?
Yeah.
But there is a subtle mentality that one needs to master when it comes to PDA. There's a subtle middle ground. There's a mentality. It's a mentality. It's an understanding. It's a mindset that I try and guide people to, rather than try this. No. There's a way of looking at PDA that suddenly causes everything to make sense. And then the child finally feels seen. You know, they feel seen upon occupying that mentality.
I think for myself, I entered my span of raising children with a significant amount of baggage, like what people had told me a good parent was, what I felt was being put on me as expectations as a parent. Somehow through my own growing up, I intuitively understood that my children would probably need to be treated as adults in tiny packages. So the way I talk to children, the way I act with children, it's all very much the same as I would anybody else. And I got a lot of criticism for that. You know, why are you not treating them as children? And I said, because I remember being exceptionally little, literally like 2 years old, and wishing people could understand what I was capable of in my head, and wishing people would listen to me when I had thoughts about what was happening out there in the world. And so I went into parenting with this idea that these were completely formed humans, and my job was to learn how to be in agreement with them for their lives. But all of that extra pressure and some other bits of my life turned me into this sort of spastic worrier that I was doing it wrong. And so when I started seeing things come from my children that were in this space of, please let me be autonomous, please let me have my own thoughts, please let me do things my way, I had this other very aggressive set of thoughts and inputs that were, you're doing it wrong, you're being too permissive, you're, you know, why aren't you doing a better job with your children? And I know my children were impacted by my stress levels and my energy, because I would ask for their input. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure you need to learn stuff and you need to go to school because everybody's telling me you have to do these things, but you really seem to be negatively impacted, so I don't know what to do. Help me, right? And it just didn't work, right? So what do you tell a parent who does want to have a lesser demand style in their parenting, but just feels totally overwhelmed by all of the external inputs of, you're doing it wrong, things should go this way, they have to go to school, they have to, like all of the have tos, or they're never going to be functioning adults?
I think you really have to think about the impact of that environment. You know, what is that? If you know at home that the low demand, the child-led approaches work, which we know they do for someone who is demand avoidant, and then you're sending them into that environment that is demand laden and full of expectation, you have to think about the impact that environment is having on your child and really break that down and think about that, because environment is everything, and you really have to make those alterations to ourselves, but also the environment. They're the two key bits, really. And you know, while we want these places, you know, I did my radio documentary all about this, we want these places, schools, to be inclusive and understanding. We also have to think they're not. And so we can go in with as many YouTube videos and as much literature and as many advocates to those meetings, but are we ultimately going to use up resources that we need to have for our child? You're not going to be able to change that environment. You know, find one, and there, you know, I don't know what it's like in the States, but here there are lots of people trying to set things up quite differently. And I think you do have quite a lot of the kind of democratic school system that's going on there. You know, places like that, you know, look at different environments. And that is where you can make a real difference. And you can see a child thrive, you know, because you often talk to parents and they're so gloomy. They have a child in what we would call mainstream, a traditional school setting, and they feel bleak about the outlook and the future. And it doesn't have to be like that. You know, you can have a child absolutely thriving, but you've got to get that environment right for them.
I often say to some parents who are of the, but one day they're going to have to be in the real world mentality, I say, in some ways, we want the same thing. I want these kids to thrive and flourish in the world and lead purposeful lives as adults. But what matters is how we get there. And we have to be realistic about what really works and what doesn't work, right? And I say to parents, if you care about your child's well-being that much, then you will take them out of that toxic environment, regardless of whether, you know, the alternatives are more difficult to come by. I care deeply about education. It's not that I'm anti-education, I'm anti-mainstream school. And I think perhaps we need to sort out our priorities. The essence of the autistic experience, much less the PDA experience, is that we pursue areas of interest instinctively. So I don't think we need to worry about that kind of thing. I really don't think we need to worry, because to me, it is akin to having breathing tuition facilities. It's like, no, I'm doing that rather involuntarily, right? There is a mistake in placing too much emphasis on the educational component because it dampens its instinctive feel. We shouldn't even have to think about it, because we don't. It's very natural. It gets built into a demand when the process becomes overly intellectualized, when legalities and bureaucracy interfere and get in the way of it. It totally taints what could be such a pleasant and even effortless pursuit. As autistic people and ADHD people, we do what is meaningful. We approach areas of interest. And I think we need to take it down a few pegs, right? There are other more pressing matters at play here. There are bigger fish to fry. And yeah, I was going to say something else with regards to perhaps that middle ground again. Sometimes it could be a matter of finding a new way to present what we may regard as life's necessities, the essentials of life. First and foremost, perhaps our minds have an entirely different prioritizing system. Is it important to me, or is it important for me? I think we will find that much of the time we place important to me at the top of the priority list, right? As is evidenced when we are at school and we are being told that there are certain subjects that are essential. Numeracy and literacy, for example, right? And I work with a lot of kids who completely reject these on all sorts of levels. Perhaps mental arithmetic is not their forte, and perhaps they just cannot ascertain a clear reason for why they need to master written English to read it. And I think sometimes if I am to concede that reading is very, very useful, what matters is how it's presented to me. How can you present reading to me almost in an entrepreneurial fashion? Recognize look at my life thoroughly, first of all, scrutinize it heavily and closely, and work out if there is a space for reading in my life before you just assert. Don't assert that anything is important. Instead, see for yourself if there is a chance I could find it important. So that's what I often call primary and secondary focuses, or more recently, tabletops and table legs. The demands of everyday life, to make it more PDA consistent here, are presented as primary. And I say, no, that's a mistake. They're not primary to the individual, whether it's reading or staying alive. Staying alive isn't primary, right? I can tell you that from that's a very difficult PDA concept to understand. Being alive is secondary as much as reading is secondary. I have to find what's primary for me and then use the secondary components as kind of like this a support. So advocacy, writing, speaking about neurodivergent experience, primary. So I recognize that I need to be alive in order to do that, right? So this is what I mean. It's a matter of representing it, because if you say they're not doing this, they're not reading, they're 10 years old, they still don't know how to read, or they don't know how to use money, they're nearly 18, they're going to have to get a job. No, you have made these primary demands because you're worried about them. Can we present them differently?
That's brilliant. Laura, I think you were having something that you might want to add
Yeah,
here.
I think it very, very simply, going back to your kind of your original question, really, I think the most simple advice I say to parents when they're questioning things, particularly education, is what is your gut telling you? Like, what is your instinct as a parent telling you? And I don't think parents' guts are ever wrong. And I think you do have to block out those other voices that are telling you that you're not doing it right. You know, those, whether it's, you know, I work with families who have had to distance themselves from their own families because they've taken their children out of school. They're pursuing a very, very different lifestyle, and they have received criticism for that. And I know that's a really difficult thing to do, to sort of have to step away from your family, but they've known in their hearts that this has been the right thing for their child. So I think, you know, often it is screaming at parents in the face, and often I'm sure Eliza and Harry have had this. When I'm doing consults, parents will tell me what they're thinking they need to do, but it's almost that like they need our permission to do it. And I'm like, yes, do it. That's what you need to do. And they're like, oh, thank you, Laura. That's what I thought I should do. And I think it's very difficult. You know, I'm a parent of a neurodivergent child, and he's not PDA, but I've received that criticism. You know, you're too soft. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And it's really, really hard. But I promise you, your instinct, your gut as a parent is always right. So just listen to what that is telling you.
Yeah, I think having folks like the three of you who can offer some of that reassurance and validation for what the parent is experiencing and feeling is amazing, in part because I think sometimes it can be, for a parent, hard to distinguish between what our gut is telling us and what our fears are telling us.
Yeah.
I may have my gut saying to back off, to relax, to let them find their way to a certain extent, and my fears screaming at me, they won't be okay, you're not setting them up for success, what will happen to them if you're not here. And the fear and gut instinct can feel very much the same when you don't have validation and support like the three of you are providing through your writing, through your blogging, through your practices. And okay, so having said that, how can people be in touch with you, and what is available to them either through each of you or out there in the world? Where do people find support?
So Harry and we run an organisation called Nest, and our website is www.nest.org, but there's a hyphen between the N and the E, so it's n-est.org. And we have a team of, they're called our FAST team, which is the Family Autism Support Team, and they're all neurodivergent. Actually, Eliza is one of our FAST team consults. And so all our consults on that team are neurodivergent parents of neurodivergent children. So they have a lot of lived experience. But I guess what's really exciting is to tell you that we are actually coming to the States in the fall. There you go. No, didn't use the English word. So I'll tell you when we're going to be there. So we're coming to California on the 5th of November. And on the 5th of November, we're doing a kind of like a conference on the Saturday. And then on the Sunday, the three of us are doing individual consults. So people can book a consultation with one of us. Then we're going to St. Louis on the 10th of November. Oh, I've missed Miami out. Sorry. We're starting on the 2nd of November in Miami. So that's a one-day conference. Then on the 5th, we go to California. We've got the conference. And then on the 6th, we're doing the one-to-one consults. Then we're doing the 10th and 11th of November in St. Louis, or St. Louis, I think people.
St. Louis, yeah.
So again, day 2, we're doing those individual consults. And then we're finishing on the 14th of November in New York. And that's the three of us. It's actually just the three of us for one day. The other dates, there's quite a lot of other speakers as well, but that final date is just the three of us. So we would obviously love people to come and listen to us at those events. And yeah, and as I say, to the events, they can actually book consultations with us as well.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for letting me know. And I'll make sure that all of that information is attached to this video so that people can find you and hopefully meet with you. Are you doing consultations via in-person exclusively, or do you use video and phone for people who are a little farther away from you?
We do online. Most of our consultations are online now, and we can offer consults with people anywhere in the world. So we regularly talk to people in America, Australia, Africa, wherever. We will talk to anybody. We've also got on the Nest website, Harry and I have recorded quite a lot of webinars. And we've also got a level 3 accredited PDA training that we wrote together last year. So that's on our website. And then all of us do regular kind of webinars and Facebook Lives as well. So the Nest Facebook page is Nest and then Neurodivergent Education Support and Training. Harry's got his Harry Thompson PDA Extraordinaire, and Eliza's got her Missing the Mark Facebook page. So we've all got our individual pages as well. Yeah, we do lots of stuff together and lots of stuff individually as well.
That's wonderful. Well, I am thrilled that we have been able to at least start giving folks some idea of what PDA is and a little bit of helpful advice. We are all going to talk a little bit more about parenting and some advice to caregivers and others that may intersect with PDA individuals and family in the next video. So make sure everybody tune into that other video as well. You'll get even more information. But thank you to the three of you. I really, really appreciate this conversation. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.